So thank you for inviting me. I'm JT Stroder. I'm a sixth generation Texan. I grew up in East Texas. I have family all over East Texas and West Louisiana. Um, I'm a graduate of Baylor University, Bachelor of Science in Education at Baylor and a Master of Science in Education Administration at Baylor University. And I got into teaching, I guess kind of late, not really late, but I had an opportunity in the mid-90s to teach a group of kids that came from broken homes at my local church. And when I did that, I absolutely fell in love with it. And I was going to Baylor studying geology at the time, and I decided that I wanted to go back to Baylor and pursue my degree in education, and I did. When I was going back to Baylor, I got in touch with the pilot program for the state juvenile justice alternative ed programs, which the pilot program was just down the road from Baylor University in Waco. And when I started teaching those kids, I absolutely fell in love with that. And my philosophy was, if I could teach the toughest kids I could find, I can teach any kid. And so I started tutoring at that program when I went back to Baylor. I had 30 of the toughest kids you could possibly find, 90% minority, 100% low SES, 100% special education. And I had an ex-Baylor football player whose job it was to sit in the corner of the room and make sure that I lived every day. These were tough kids. These were kids that were on the verge of going to Texas Department of Juvenile Corrections. And when I started doing that, I actually learned quite a bit about being a teacher. And it's kind of extended into my career as an administrator. And that is, in order to be an effective teacher, you have to be able to put yourself in the shoes of your students. And I didn't learn that until about 2/3 of the way through my first year. One Friday afternoon, we closed all the books, and I sat down with my training officer, and we started playing dominoes with the kids. And playing dominoes, I didn't know at the time, but playing dominoes was a big part of the inner city culture in Waco. And when I started doing that with my kids, it opened up a whole new world for me. And so that's extended into my career as an administrator. When I'm working with struggling teachers, when I'm working with struggling principals, I take that same approach. When I'm dealing with parents that come in that have issues with the school, I take the same approach. I try to put myself in their shoes and see where they're coming from and try to establish a connection there. So when I finished the program when I finished my master's program at Baylor, the director of that program encouraged me to go back to pursue my master's. The Dallas and the Houston programs had come online by that time. And there was a company out of San Marcos, Texas called Brown Schools that was delivering the curriculum at the Dallas and the Houston facilities. And they asked me if I would be willing to go to North Idaho and actually develop and design an accelerated program for 17-year-olds in North Idaho. So that's how I moved from Texas to Idaho. Did that for 2 years, got the campus in accreditation status. And at that time, I decided I wanted to start working towards my doctorate. So I started looking for a place close to the University of Idaho. Found a school district down in southern Idaho called Camas County. Went down there as the principal. And within 2 years, the superintendent there kind of groomed me to replace him as superintendent. But what was really unique about that position is when I started at Camas County, it's not like the school districts in Texas where there's over 1,000. There's only like 100 school districts in Idaho, but Camas County was ranked in the bottom 10% of the school districts in Idaho in every academic area. And we did some very unique things there with assessment and small group instruction and differentiated instruction. And in 3 years, we had the largest growth in the state of Idaho. And in 2009, we were nominated for a National Blue Ribbon for growth in a high poverty school district. And we actually won that. We were the first school district in 30 years to win that in the state of Idaho. As a result of that, I had an opportunity to go back to Texas to work with a district that had just been placed on monitoring by TEA for two things. One was financial mismanagement. They dropped below their state mandated fund balance. And the second was academics. They had two schools in AYP jail. That was Ingram, Texas. So went to Ingram, Texas. Within 1 year, we had the district out of financial trouble, back on solid ground, and replaced the fund balance. By year 2, both of those campuses were out of AYP jail, and they actually had their first campus ever that reached exemplary status, doing some of the same things that we did at, that we did at Kansas County. When I was at Ingram, I was born and raised in Texas, but my dad was living in Wyoming because he kind of spent his life in the oil fields. And he started becoming ill. And we tried to convince him to move back to Texas, but he didn't. He was convinced he was fine. So at that point, I decided to put my career on the back burner, move close to him in Wyoming so I could kind of care for him as he got older. He passed away in 2015. Went to Gardner, Montana. Gardner was a high-performing district, totally opposite of the other districts that I worked at. Gardner was a high-performing district. 4 out of the last 5 years that I was at Gardner, they were the #1 ranked school district in Montana, and I think we reached number 200 nationally. Doing some of the same things that we did in Ingram, some of the same things that we did in Kansas County. Ultimately knew that I wanted to be south. You probably saw my laptop here. Yes, my name on the back. That's actually from my daughter. She's in the ROTC program at Baylor University. My son is a sophomore, and he really wants to go to school at LSU and throw discus for LSU. He was the state champion discus thrower for 3A for the state of Utah last year as a freshman. So he's targeted LSU as a place where he wants to go get a scholarship and throw a discus, throw a round object. So that's kind of why I'm interested in Natchitoches. Two things, I was born and raised in the South. I'm 6th generation Texan. I know this area well. I just had lunch today with a friend in Opelousas at Billy's Boudin. I couldn't pass that up since I was in Louisiana.
Most people can't.
But ultimately, kind of, I've been a turnaround superintendent most of my career, but I love it and I'm passionate about it and I'm good with it. But ultimately, I want to get back to my roots and I want to get back to raising cattle, which I did for 20 years, 30 years of my life. And if you look around Natchitoches a little bit, you kind of see some cows. There's a lot of good affordable ag land around Natchitoches, so I'm extremely interested in this position, and thank you for inviting me. So I hope I didn't go longer than 10 minutes.
Thank you. We're now breaking into our Q&A section. Mr. Arnold will lead us out.
Yes, sir. How would you establish an effective professional development program and establish a track of employment?
Career
track for employment.
Career tracks. I don't make decisions based on emotion, ever. I think you get in trouble when you make decisions based on emotion. You have to make decisions based on data, and you make decisions based on a lot of data. For a student, you're making decisions based on what that student knows and is able to do and can perform. We do the same thing for a teacher. You try to put systems in place so that teachers can grow professionally, and then you use that data to track whether or not they're growing professionally. You do the same thing with district programs and systems. You put data in place to monitor the effectiveness of those programs. So when you're establishing an effective professional development program, you have to have the data in place to tell you whether or not it's effective, right? You can't go based on feelings. That's not always correct. So you have to have data in place. And so, I guess I would want to do something similar with career tracks, try to take the emotion out of it and try to put some data in place that can really tell you what's going on, from students right on up to teachers, right on up to administrators. right on up to me as the superintendent.
Any follow with that, board members? Okay. Ms. Palmer?
Mr. Stroder, what is your experience with improving a school or a school district? What steps would you suggest for Natchitoches Parish?
Well, I think I talked a little bit about it. I didn't get into education because the pay is great and the hours are great, and the benefits are great. I got in because I love teaching kids, and I love teaching at-risk kids. And that's extended to me as an administrator. You know, I loved working with teachers that were struggling, and it's the same as a superintendent. So I went from a teacher of students to a teacher of teachers, and as a superintendent now, I'm a teacher of leaders within the district. And that's kind of been my career path. And so my philosophy always throughout my career has been one of improvement. How can I get this student that's sitting in front of me struggling to buy in and improve? And I take the same approach with a teacher. You know, how can I get this teacher that might be struggling to buy in and improve? And the same with the principal. So, and that doesn't just extend to folks that are struggling. You know, that also extends to people who are doing very well. My conversation with principals who do well and teachers who do well is, you know, more of a self-reflection in, you know, what are the areas that you think you need to improve as a teacher or as a principal? You know, how do I help you improve that? So it's always been one of improvement. You know, I have a very solid track record with districts that need improvement. And it's really been because of that approach and because I use data. And, you know, I've looked at your data. You got 3 schools, you know, if this data is correct, you got 3 schools with an F, you got 2 with a D, 1 with a C, 3 with a B, no, actually 5 with a B, 2 with A's. Typically what I do with high-performing students, high-performing campuses, high-performing principals is I give them the freedom to experiment and try new things. With ones that aren't, though, we go to the data and we start using data to try to paint a picture of what is occurring at that campus and within those classrooms. And taking that data and saying, okay, what are the programs that we can put in place? What are the things that we can do to try to individualize instruction, to try to differentiate instruction, to try to create small groups? And that was really the successful formula at Camas County was creating those small groups. We had a really good assessment that was not a criterion referenced assessment. And I'm not gonna get in deep into types of assessments unless you want me to. But we were using an assessment that really painted a picture of what a kid knew, not at grade level, what they knew overall, period. And so with students that were struggling, it didn't make any difference what grade level they were in. If they were struggling with some of the same skill sets and some of the same concepts, we would put them in a small group and do intense focus on that specific skill set. Once they mastered that, we would move them out. When we started those groups at Camas County, I think we probably had 65 groups of small group instruction. By year 4, we had 12 because we were moving students out of those groups. The assessment was good enough that it could give us enough information to teach a specific skill set and strengthen that student's skill set. So that's kind of been the formula, and I've extended that formula into kind of all areas as an administrator.
How large was that district?
Camas County was 200 students. Ingram was the same. Ingram was 1,100 students. It worked both. It worked at both.
Any follow-up questions? Mr. Dancy?
What experience do you have in budgets, and how do we ensure that we are being fiscally responsible for our financial resources, and how do we communicate that to our board and our community stakeholders?
I'm very good with technology. And even as a young administrator, when I was a principal and a young superintendent, and I've been a superintendent for 15 years, I've seen a lot of scenarios in terms of budgets. and academics, but really some historic budget scenarios that I can't really talk about within like a 3 or 4 minute time frame, but really some fascinating experiences. But what I've always done is I've always created my own budget spreadsheet in Excel. So when it's time for me to talk to the board about the budget process, I know firsthand what I'm talking about. And I created it so I could run scenarios within a matter of seconds. So when we're talking about budget, if the board's wanting to look at specific things, I can tweak the budget just within a matter of seconds and see the bottom line. I've been a superintendent for 15 years, and I think 1 year I had a budget that was a deficit budget because I monitored it closely. And that 1 year was the year that you could probably research it online. That was the year that the National Park Service pulled funding from Gardner School District, and it was 20% of Gardner's budget. And we had to enact state and federal legislation to deal with that financial crisis. That was back when sequestration happened, I think in 2013, when the government shut down, and as a result, the Park Service kind of shut down their funding, and we lost that funding. So that was the only year I had a deficit budget. It's always been a concern, with districts, with my budget experience. Ingram, I could talk to you for probably just an hour in itself on Ingram's financial issues and how we dealt with that, and kind of the ramifications that it had statewide, which really led to the last big lawsuit in Texas for school finance, because it really shined a light on the inequities of funding within Texas. There's articles on that out there too, if you want to see those. I've saved all those articles. But my budget experience is extremely good, and it's because I don't allow somebody else to do it for me. I do it for myself. I monitor it myself. I've picked up funding formulas in 4 states very efficiently, and it's just something I'm good at. I wouldn't say it's my favorite area. It's not teaching kids, but I know how to do it.
As a follow-up to that, what did you do when you had a deficit? Did you have to have a layoff of people, or
In Ingram or Gardner, or both?
got both? Yeah.
So in Ingram, what we did was kind of looked at our facilities. We did a facility study. We reshuffled some of our grade levels, like moved 6th grade out of middle school back down to the elementary campus, where there was room. Sold about 12 portables, worth probably $750,000. We didn't really, I think we might have had 10 RIFs in Ingram out of the 250 staff, but most of it we absorbed through attrition.
So
Yeah.
you felt the heat on that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and there was big concern in Gardner as well, but we ended up getting the state of Wyoming to pick up the bill for that, so.
Thank you.
Any follow-up, board member? Mr. Gaskin.
Mr. Stroder. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Stroder.
Stroder.
Long yes, ma'am.
What steps do you take to establish the public relations and communication plans with all stakeholders in the district?
Well, I'm very transparent in my communication. If people want to know the reason behind why I'm making the decision, I tell them. And, I tell them the truth. I'm transparent in my decision-making process. I've also been the person in Gardner and in Camas County and even in Moab, my current position, to kind of design the website just to get information out there, as well as the Facebook pages. Gardner was a smaller community, but some of the things we communicated in Gardner reached over 3,000 people. And that was a small community. So I'm very good with social media. I'm very good with website. I meet with parents, community members a lot to kind of see, what are the things you want to hear from the school district? What are the things you want to see from the school district? When there's problems that arise, we're honest about it, we're transparent about it, we don't hide things unless we're governed by law. When it's a personnel issue, that's the only time people don't give an explanation of why we've made a decision. And so that's really, I think, your best PR plan is one of transparency. Be transparent with what you're doing.
Any follow-up with that, board member?
Oh, we're so quiet.
Sir?
Quiet.
Oh, we're so quiet.
Well, we want to make sure we absorb everything that you throw at us, Mike. Our hands up.
I haven't seen which one.
It's just a list of cable that goes across the top, that's what I'm just looking for. That's right here. Oh, excuse us for that. Now, try. Let's try to try it now.
So, is this better?
Is that
Is this better?
Okay.
Thank you.
Stay right there. Stay right there.
It's good.
Yeah, I think it's good. Is that good?
Mr. Stroder, based on your knowledge, what do you perceive are the top 3 issues in our parish, and what is your plan to address them?
Well, I'm going to cheat you on the top issue. Because the top issue is probably hiring this position right here. This is probably the most important decision you have facing you right now, is hiring the person that's going to fill these shoes. Because that's the person that's going to work with the board, that's the person that's going to work with the community, that's the person that's going to work with the staff to improve the system. So this is a pretty important issue facing you right now, is this position. And I would say second is, you have 3 elementary schools that are struggling, and you need somebody that's going to come in and work with those administrators and work with those staff and try to identify what the issues are and try to find unique and creative ways to put systems in place to reach those students. So I would say those are probably the top 2. I'd probably say the third is probably communication. I think you would need a really good communication program. It's hard to find good information. I checked your Facebook page, and I didn't see a lot of information on there, the kind of information that I've been used to putting on there and getting out to parents. So those are probably the top 3. This position, those campuses that are struggling, and the good communication plan.
Any follow-up, board member?
A follow-up. So you're used to using Facebook a lot?
Facebook, yeah, we use Facebook, we use Twitter, we use the website. That's probably, Facebook and Twitter probably reached the majority of our folks, just because the parent population right now, the young parent population is probably using Twitter and Snapchat more than anything else. But the kind of that older, that middle level, upper level, we use Facebook more than anything else. So we kind of use a combination of those 2 to try to reach those parents.
Ms. Phelps?
Yes. What steps would you take to evaluate the current leadership positions within the central office? Provide a time when you've had to repurpose an employee to move to a more productive position.
So when I'm looking for leaders, I look for a pretty simple thing. I look for people who consider that the job they are in is a calling and not a job. And if I can find people who consider it a calling, then I can connect with those people and I can work with those people. If it's just a job, I'll be honest with you. If it's just a job, I have a harder time connecting with those people. And, we tend to not see eye to eye. So when I'm looking for leadership, I look for people that are called to be educators. And that kind of helps create an immediate rapport with those people. I don't like repurposing employees. So, I give people a lot of time and space to grow and a lot of feedback to grow. And you know, occasionally I might move someone into a different position to see if just maybe it was the situation that they were in. But by that time, I usually have enough data to know if it's going to be a good fit for the district or not. So I can tell you about, you know, 4 administrators over the course of my career that I had to have tough conversations with and let go. We didn't repurpose them. We had to let them go. Just because, you know, it wasn't working out for the district. I do everything I can to get an employee or leader to improve. But over time, if it's not happening, then you have to have a tougher conversation. I'm not a big fan of repurposing. I'm not a big fan of moving a poor performer into another position. Rarely have I seen that work in over 15 years as a superintendent. So I would say, I wouldn't say move them into a more productive position. I would say I try to move them into a more productive work ethic. And then if that doesn't get there, then we talk about moving them on.
Any follow-up, board members? Okay, Mr. Klein.
What experience have you had with transportation programs, and how do you manage a contract system?
Well, I drove a bus up until about 3 years ago. I just let my Class B go like 3 years ago. You know, my job just got too big in Moab. You know, I always tried to I always would pick an event and I'd drive a bus to an event just so I could kind of stay connected with, you know, what those drivers were going through and what they were experiencing. In Gardner, I actually drove a route for half the year because we lost the driver. So as the superintendent, I was going out there at 7 o'clock in the morning driving the route. So that's my experience with the transportation program. You know, often school boards and people will look at smaller school superintendents and think, well, you know, I don't have any experience in a large program. I would beg to differ. I would say a small school superintendent wears every hat you can imagine. I was the director of transportation. I was the director of human resources. I had to develop policy, so I had to know education law. When I would lose a budget manager, which has happened twice in my career, I kind of had to serve as the finance person. So there's not any areas that I don't know as a superintendent. I know federal programs, I know transportation, I know human resources, I know finance. I still volunteer coach athletics, so I know coaching. I just love what I do. So, you know, with transportation program, I have a ton of experience with transportation firsthand, and that's from state reporting to driving a bus to policies that govern transportation. I don't have experience managing a contracted system, so that would be new. That would be new for me. So I'm going to assume you have a contract with an outside provider for transportation services. I'm familiar with them, but I've never had one myself.
Okay, Reverend Harris.
Dr. Stroder, you sound like a small community pastor wearing all kind of hats. We have a large African American student population here in Natchitoches Parish. How do you foresee enhancing meaningful administrative positions for qualified African Americans throughout our parish?
I think the best way to do that is to grow your own. I think that's the very best way to do that. And I believe you have NSU here, is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah, that has a teacher education program. Natchitoches Parish should be growing its own teachers. You should be identifying those teachers as high school students. We're doing that now in Moab. We have CTE courses that are 5 CTE courses that are the foundations of teaching. And so we're identifying teachers as high schoolers, kids that might have a passion in that, so we're growing our own. I would say that Natchitoches Parish has a golden opportunity to do that with the resource that you have here. So if that's the goal of Natchitoches Parish, then identify those students in high school and start working with them at a young age. And I might have an opportunity to talk about outside funding here shortly. We'll see. But I think you can do some unique things to kind of grow your own and even offer kids some scholarships that might not otherwise be able to go to school. So.
Thank you.
Any follow-up, that board members? Okay, Mr. Brumwood?
Yes. Why do you think schools in the same district have significant differences in academic progress and academic achievement? Please explain how you would address this, and if applicable, provide examples where you have done so.
That's a really tough question to say that it's necessarily one thing. I think you have to have, I'm going to go back to the data answer. You've got to have good, solid data in place to kind of paint the picture on what is occurring at each campus. So, I think districts probably have significant differences. It could be any number of reasons. It could be because there's a curricular misalignment at one campus versus another campus. I've never been a big fan of using demographics as an excuse because I truly believe that every student can be educated. What I do believe is you don't have enough data in place maybe to really paint the picture of what those kids are missing. So it could be curricular misalignment between campuses. It could be demographics in the sense that there's big gaps that aren't being addressed between students on campuses. You have to have data, to monitor teaching within those campuses. It could actually be teaching within those campuses. That's one of the things you got to monitor. And I think you guys are thinking about it because you're talking about career tracks. So you have to have data in place. How I address that is actually using that data once we get a picture painted and try to address those specific issues that we are thinking are causing the problem. Whether it is curricular misalignment, which is a pretty easy thing to see if you've got good data in place. That's how we did it in Ingram. Whenever we looked at the data, K-12 that we were using, and I've used NWEA's MAP assessment. I can explain more of that if you want to later, but it's when we would use that data, we would look vertically, and we saw really quick that our math program was good. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade, it was okay. Third grade, we started losing it. Fourth grade, we lost more ground. Fifth grade, we lost more ground. And then by sixth grade, we were having to make up all the ground that we lost. So we started addressing that immediately. And that was really part of the difference. That was more, I wouldn't say that was necessarily campuses so much as it was a district issue. So it's really hard for me to sit here and say, without knowing those campuses intimately, what are the differences, but those are some of the things that can cause differences in performance at campuses. Sometimes it might be teacher burnout, so you might have to run some culture surveys and kind of see what's going on culturally. It could be a culture issue at a campus. You just kind of have to start putting the puzzle pieces in place to figure out what it is that's causing the differences.
Mr. Stroder, quick follow-up question, enjoyed your answer. Big gaps not being addressed in demographics. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
On achievement gaps, you have to differentiate instruction. So if a teacher just assumes that every kid is coming into their class at the same level of instruction, it's a bad assumption. So you try to put assessments in place that really allows teachers to see who they have in their class. You don't work off of assumptions. The entire, and I can say this because I'm a Texan and I grew up in Texas, and so I knew No Child Left Behind intimately as an administrator. It was a bad assumption under No Child left behind. The assumption was that every student who was a fourth grade student comes into fourth grade ready to learn a fourth grade skill set. And that's a bad assumption. You could have a campus where you have, let's say you have 4 classes of fourth graders, and 2 entire populations of that class could be performing at a grade level, 1 or 2 grade levels before that, or below that. So as a campus, you have to figure out real quick how you're going to differentiate instruction for those students to try to get them caught up.
So that leads to your small groups?
Yes, that was why we were using small groups. That's the most efficient way to get it done, small group instruction.
So when you have issues with, situations like cultural differences, what would be your, tool to help to resolve some of those issues?
Culture?
Yes.
Culture's a tough one.
Like
Yeah.
large minority population,
Yeah.
new teachers.
Yeah, I think, I'm gonna go back to growing your own. I think if you kind of start growing your own teachers, you're gonna be growing teachers that are kind of familiar with, how they came through that system and what that campus looked like. I think it's hard to go out there when, this is the hard thing that I don't like about the school grading system. People get an idea when they see a campus with an F on what that represents. And that may not be, they see that as a failing school. And so that tends to say something to the people working in those schools. Matter of fact, Utah's doing away with grades this next year. They're running legislation, they're going to do away with grades for that very reason. Just because it's creating culture issues where there doesn't need to be culture issues. So the culture, I wish I had the magic bullet for coming in and saying, this is how you fix a cultural issue, but cultural issues can be any number of things, from the way the teachers feel about that campus, to the way the leadership feels about that campus, to the way the parents feel about that campus. And that's kind of why I was saying, when you start running some surveys, you might be able to get an idea on specifically what is the cultural issue on that campus, and then you can address it. If it's poor performance, that's an easy thing for me to fix in my mind. If it's an image of the campus, you kind of start having to do things through your PR programs, through your communication, to try to change the perception of that campus. So it's just different depending on what the cultural issue is.
Ms. Willis.
What will you do to increase dual enrollment and jumpstart pathways?
Well, again, you have NSU here. They're not dual programs set up with NSU? Yes, no? Does anybody know? Yes, there are.
We're looking at.
So we have a very strong CTE program in Moab. As a matter of fact, the director of the FCC came down last year just to visit our campus because of our CTE programs and what we're doing with dual credit, dual enrollment. I've had a lot of ideas over the course of my career. Some of them were great. Some of them were giant flops. But one of the ones that I've always been trying to get going is really changing the structure of the 7 through 12 program, and not assuming just because that's the way we went to school, that's the way it should be done, but really changing it so that it allows students who want to go to college to be able to complete 2 years of college before they actually graduate from high school with an associate's degree. That's kind of what our goal is at Grand County, and we're having some success there. But not only for the students that aren't going to college, but more through the CTE programs. Okay, the students that aren't going to college, really freeing them up their last 2 years of high school to pursue career-specific certifications, which might be, like a health services certification, or a nursing, or food services, or hospitality. Really getting those students kind of changing the structure so that students can kind of focus on those more. The students that are going to college focus more on AP dual credit. The students that aren't focus more on those career-specific certifications. That might be construction, that might be electrician, but really kind of creating those opportunities within the high school.
Any follow?
Yeah, Dr. Stroder, I think our problem has been that we haven't been so intentional on our end. Didn't have anything to do with Northwestern, because I just attended a food service program that they had, and some of our people came, but we got 2 state-of-the-art schools with culinary arts that they're just chopping at the bit to get started. So you're right. The number one thing we got is once we get the soup in situated, we're gonna have everything.
Well, we'll be off to in the right direction. Okay. Let's keep going.
What steps would you take to improve teacher and leadership morale that would not require additional funding?
Well, you could like pull a big barbecue pit up to the school and cook them dinner occasionally. Well, no, that would require additional funding, sorry. Scratch that idea. You try to put programs in place, systems in place to recognize star performers in your district. That doesn't create a lot of money. Recognizing those folks that are doing great things out there, and celebrating them, that doesn't cost a lot of money. Maybe some Facebook posts, maybe some social media posts, maybe some other, small things. You can always, one of the things that I've done in Grand County to get some programs going, I haven't talked about it, but I'll talk a little bit about it, is our community school intervention program, which is really designed to identify those students that are struggling the most, that campuses aren't being successful with, and then having a coordinator that works with outside agencies. So when school districts kind of reach their wits' end with those students that are struggling and say, we can't figure this out, then we start involving some community agencies to try to help figure that out, try to get the parents and support. The other one is school-based mental health therapists. We're the first school in Utah to have 4 school-based mental health therapists that are employed by the school district for those same reasons. And I say that because those were things that did not cost the district additional funding. As the superintendent, I went out and talked to outside donors and kind of explained what I wanted to do and said, hey, would you be willing to fund this position for 3 years, maybe 5 years, and let us see if it works and how it works. The school-based mental health therapists worked so well that the negotiations team came back the next year and said, we want these positions at each campus. It's worked so well at the elementary, we want one at the high school, we want one at the middle school. So we did, and, that didn't cost additional funding, but we, as a district, we took some money that the negotiations committee actually gave up, some raises to get those programs in place because we were able to go out and show that they worked. So I would say the same thing, I'd say with not including additional funding, maybe you go around to businesses in town, you get businesses to kind of, throw in some things to recognize your star performers, give them some perks that they might not otherwise get, and the same with your leaders. I think there's all kinds of creative ways that you can recognize the people that are doing a great job for you.
Mr. Stroder, we're at the point for your closing remarks. And, do you have any questions of us?
What's happening with the current superintendent?
He is probably going to retire.
Okay, and is he choosing to retire, or is he being encouraged to retire? I don't know if you can answer that or not.
Well, let's continue with our closing remarks.
Okay.
We don't want to discuss it.
I'm with you. Okay. Tell me as a school board, how you see yourself interact with this role. Just quickly, anybody, like, what do you see this relationship as? Like, I know what I see it as, but I'm curious what you see it as.
Teamwork.
Right, with us working together with you.
Teamwork, collaboration.
Transparency.
It's a historical relationship.
Okay, I really see this role as one of, the person that sits in this position kind of has to work as the liaison between the community and the school. And the school board is kind of the representation of the community. And, you live in the community, you're part of the community, you were entrusted by the community to kind of sit in this seat. And, it's my job to keep a close pulse on that as superintendent. What is the community seeing? What is the community hearing? And that's kind of the symbiotic role that I play with you and learning what that is. And then at the same time, I take that and then I communicate that back to staff on the school district side. Look, these are what the community issues are. These are what they see. This is what they're seeing. How are we going to address it? So I'm glad to hear that you think it's one of the teamwork. Are there any skeletons in the closet that I need to know about?
No.
There's a lot of skeletons, we just don't want them to come outside. We gotta get rid of that.
Let's just say that every school system has things. We don't anticipate anything popping out, but, it's no different than any school system in America.
What do you see as the number one issue is? You asked me what I think it is. What do you think the number one issue is facing this district?
Well, I tell you, let's let you answer that question and go ahead and break it to your closing.
Oh, I answered that. I gave you my top three. So I would just say, if I do this because I'm passionate about it. I do it because I was called to do it. I didn't talk about my philosophy, but my philosophy drives every decision that I make as a superintendent. And my philosophy is that I believe every child is a unique individual. And they have a soul, they have an eternal destiny, and they have a special purpose. And our job as educators is to help them find that special purpose. So when I'm making decisions in the district, every decision that I make is weighed against the ethical and moral nature of that philosophy. I gotta weigh it against that philosophy and say, is this decision that we're making one that's gonna help kids find their special purpose? So if you hire me because I was called to do this, not because I want to do this. But I was called.